Hello, my name's Melody. My mother's fiancé beat me so badly I couldn't stand straight, and when I left bleeding, my mom texted me 5 words. Stay away from us. No concern. No explanation, just exile. But maybe that was easier for her than admitting she watched it happen and said nothing. They told the rest of the family I was unstable, that I made it all up. And somehow they believed her. Now I'm sitting in a house I co-own, the same one they tried to erase me from, wondering, what kind of mother watches her daughter break and sides with the man who shattered her? Would you? Rain swept across the windows like whispers I didn't want to hear, the kind of rain that filled the silence you hoped would be broken by something kinder than what you already knew. We sat there, me, my mother Maris, and her fiancé Dorian, at the dining table in our family home in Eugene. The roast chicken was dry, the air thicker than the gravy I couldn't bring myself to touch. Dorian cut into his plate with too much force. Clinks and clatters marked every move he made. I tried to focus on the steamed carrots. You know, he started, his tone always too casual to be harmless. It wouldn't kill you to show a little gratitude, living here rent-free and all. My fork paused mid-air. I looked at my mother. She stirred her tea like she hadn't heard him, or maybe she didn't want to. Dorian, I said calmly, I co-signed the mortgage. You know that. He chuckled, a dry, mocking sound. You were just the signature, sweetheart. Paper filler. Let the adults handle the real work. I felt my jaw tighten, but I didn't answer. Then he leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms. And what exactly do you do around here, Melody, besides sulk and suck the air out of the room? Enough, I said, keeping my voice steady. You've made your point. His eyes narrowed, his smile vanished. Have I? He stood. My chair scraped back instinctively as I pushed away from the table. Sit down, he barked. No. He moved fast, too fast for a man who spent most days watching cable news and drinking light beer. His fist cracked across my cheek. I hit the floor hard, my ribs catching the table's edge on the way down. The pain came second. The disbelief came first. And then, her voice, my mother's voice. Quiet, cold. Don't make a scene, Melody. I stared up from the floor, the room blurring around the edges. Her teacup was steady in her hand. She hadn't moved. Blood ran from my split lip down my chin. He stood over me like nothing had happened, like I was the one who needed to apologize for being in the way. I crawled to my feet slowly. Every breath felt like a knife edge. I didn't say a word. Upstairs, I grabbed my coat, my purse. Didn't take anything else. I walked past her. She didn't meet my eyes. As I reached the door, I paused. Just long enough to give her one last chance. She didn't take it. I stepped outside. The door clicked shut behind me. That sound, it echoed louder than the slap. Outside, under the dull gas station light, I pulled my phone from my coat pocket. Blood had crusted on my lip. The cold night air stung my skin. One new message, from her. Stay away from us. Nothing else. No, are you okay? No hesitation. Just a line like a sentence, a command, a rejection. I don't remember driving home, just the cold of the steering wheel in my hands. My apartment was still as I'd left it, quiet, dim, a secondhand couch, the scent of lavender from the diffuser I'd set to go off at 9 p.m. I sat on the floor and tried to breathe, not from the pain in my side, though that was there, sharp and insistent, but from what had been torn, not my skin, my certainty. She saw him hurt me, and she chose him. She picked him over me. All those years of being the easy daughter, the one who didn't talk back, didn't make trouble, who paid the electric bill when she couldn't, who drove her to appointments, who said nothing when Dorian moved in and rearranged the furniture, rearranged our lives. And now, I was the threat. I curled into myself on the floor. It wasn't crying, not exactly. It was something deeper, something that felt like loss, but worse, betrayal. When the ache dulled just enough, I got up. Slowly, carefully, I reached into the back of the closet, past the box of old sweaters, past the worn Christmas decorations, a file folder, labeled in my handwriting, property documents. I opened it on the kitchen counter. My breath caught. There, on page 3 of the mortgage agreement, were our signatures. Mine, hers, co-owner, Melody, R. She said I had no place there, but legally, I still did. And suddenly, the fire of betrayal, hot, searing, shifted into something else entirely. Something colder, sharper, determined. The rain hit my skin like a warning, but the folder in my hand held the truth they couldn't erase. I stood still under the dim light outside my apartment door for longer than I should have, just letting the cold cut through my coat while my fingers gripped the file tighter. When I stepped inside, the silence wrapped around me like an old habit. The walls knew more about me than my family ever did. I placed the folder on the kitchen counter but didn't open it again. Not yet. Something about staring at my name on that deed had lit a fuse, but I wasn't ready to let the fire burn. Not tonight. The next morning, my cousin Kayla called. I hadn't heard from her in months, not since the last family cookout, where she'd spent more time talking to Dorian than to me. Her voice was too chipper to be genuine. "Hey, Mel, just wanted to check in," she started. I let the silence stretch. She coughed. "So, Aunt Maris said you, kinda lost it. She's real worried. Said you stormed out, made things hard at the house. You okay?" I closed my eyes. Of course. Of course, Maris was already reshaping the story, already painting me as the dramatic one. "I didn't lose it," I said calmly. "He hit me." A beat of silence. Kayla's tone dropped. "Melody, you sure? I mean, she said you were acting jealous, that you couldn't handle her being happy." I ended the call. The second I hung up, I knew it wasn't going to stop there. The next few days, everything started shifting. At the grocery store, Ms. Benton, the church secretary, turned her cart the other direction when she saw me near the bakery. At the post office, one of the younger women from choir smiled, then quickly looked away. It was subtle, but unmistakable. Whispers, half-finished sentences, eyes that darted away too quickly. By Thursday, it was online. I logged onto Facebook late at night, insomnia pressing into my chest like a weight. My sister Isolda had posted a quote. "Some people thrive on drama because it's the only time they feel seen." No names, no comments. But everyone in that circle would know exactly who she meant. She hadn't called, not once, not when I'd left the house bruised, not when I got that text from our mother, not now. I stared at her post for a long time. My thumb hovered over the like button, not to approve, but as some ridiculous reminder that I was still in the picture, still family. I didn't tap it. The following Sunday, I got an invitation. Maris was hosting a family lunch. I almost deleted the text, but something inside me said to go. Maybe it was defiance, maybe it was foolishness. I arrived 5 minutes early, out of habit more than politeness. The living room looked exactly as it always had, though it felt colder. Not from temperature, but from the chill behind the greetings. Dorian didn't even look at me. My mother gave me a quick nod, then handed me a napkin. "We're just getting ready to serve," she said like I was the neighbor, not her daughter. During dessert, the barbs started to fly. Not from Dorian, not directly, from the ones who knew how to wound with a smile. My Aunt Teresa leaned back in her chair and said, "We all go through pain. We don't make a show of it." Laughter, light, but sharp. I looked to my mother. She was stirring her coffee. No defense, nothing. I felt like I'd shrunk, right there in that room. When the conversation turned to renovations Dorian was planning, my house, I couldn't stay quiet. I cleared my throat. I was hit. In that house. The room hushed, like the air had been sucked out. Uncle Roy snorted. "Then why didn't you call the cops?" Someone laughed. I stood up. My chest burned. My ribs still ached, but not like this. Not like this betrayal. Maris didn't say a word. She didn't even look at me. I walked out without my coat. Rain hit my face, soaked my blouse, but I didn't care. I walked to my car, hands shaking, and sat inside for nearly 10 minutes without starting the engine. My phone buzzed. A message from Kayla. "You didn't have to make it weird. Seriously." I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. I stared at the windshield, the rain streaking like tears I refused to shed. "If they want me gone," I whispered to no one, "I'll give them gone." I walked into the apartment, soaked to the bone, the file folder clutched to my chest like a lifeline. I didn't bother changing out of my wet clothes. I dropped my keys, locked the door behind me, and went straight to the kitchen table. The folder thudded onto the wood with a finality that felt strangely satisfying. I pulled out the papers with shaking fingers. My hands weren't trembling from the cold anymore. Something else had taken over. Something colder than anger, quieter than rage. The mortgage documents were where I left them, 2 years ago, when I filed them away thinking I'd done something noble. I skimmed past the first page, then the second. There it was, my name, right there next to hers. Borrower 1, Maris R. Borrower 2, Melody R. I stared at it like I was seeing my name for the first time. They'd tried to erase me, pretended I was just some visitor who'd overstayed her welcome. But legally, I was the foundation under their fantasy. I sat back in the chair. My ribs still ached from the hit, but the pain had settled into something familiar now, like an old scar I could trace with my breath. A flash of memory hit me before I could stop it. Maris had cried the day we went to the bank. Not little tears. No, these were stage-worthy sobs. "I'm going to lose the house," she'd whispered, clutching her coat tighter around her thin frame. "Your father left us nothing. I have nothing. Melody, you know I wouldn't ask if I had a choice." I remember staring at the papers, pen in hand, pulse pounding in my ears. "I just need your name. That's all. Please." I thought signing it would bring us closer. That maybe, just maybe, she'd see me as more than the daughter who always stayed quiet. Back then, I didn't realize how dangerous it was to give someone like her that kind of power. Now I knew better. I opened my laptop, placed the folder beside it, and started typing into the search bar. Oregon cosigner mortgage rights. Half an hour later, I was staring at words that lit something deep in my chest. If a cosigner withdraws from an active mortgage, the bank may freeze or call the loan depending on underwriting policy. My hand moved to the mouse slowly, deliberately. I opened my email. To Client Services at Pine Ridge Bank. Com. Subject, Mortgage Account. 3876, Withdrawal of Guarantee. In the body, I wrote simply, "Dear Officer, I am writing to request immediate review of mortgage account number 3876 for withdrawal of cosigner guarantee. Attached are documents showing proof of co-ownership and intent to rescind my participation in the current agreement. This action is prompted by personal safety concerns and breach of trust regarding other parties listed on the loan. Sincerely, Melody R. I attached the documents. Clicked Save as Draft. Not yet. I needed to be sure. I sat back in my chair and stared at the glowing screen. That house wasn't just wood and drywall. It was years of manipulation painted in eggshell white, covered with throw pillows and live, laugh, love signs. It was the place where my voice was always an inconvenience. I thought back to the look in Maris's eyes at that family lunch. Not confusion, not guilt, just detachment. Like I'd been edited out of her memory. Well, let's see what happens when the paper trail proves otherwise. I got up and poured a glass of water. My hand was steady. Back at the table, I hovered over the send button. The room was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the refrigerator and the rain tapping the windows like a metronome. They think I'm helpless. They think I'll curl up and disappear, like a good little burden. I cracked my knuckles and smiled, just barely. Let's see how helpless I look when their dream house starts to rot from the foundation they tried to bury me under. I didn't sleep much that night. I stayed on the couch, the hum of the refrigerator filling the quiet like background static in a broken radio. The draft email sat open on my laptop, the cursor blinking like it was daring me to act. Around 4 a.m., I finally closed the screen and laid down. I didn't dream. I just waited. By the time sunlight pushed through the blinds, my phone had already buzzed 3 times, 2 missed calls from Aunt Teresa, 1 from Maris. I didn't answer. I sat at the edge of the bed, rubbing the back of my neck, staring at the floor like it held some kind of answer. I wasn't the one who broke anything. I wasn't the one who lied or covered bruises with polite smiles and whispered excuses. I wasn't the one pretending. And yet, they'd turned the spotlight on me like I was the villain in their well-crafted performance. I stood up, walked to the kitchen, and opened the laptop again. The email was still there, waiting. My finger hovered over the trackpad. "I'm not the bad one here," I whispered. Then I clicked send. There was no dramatic music, no rush of vindication, just a quiet ping as the message left the outbox. I stared at the screen for a long minute. My heartbeat didn't quicken, but something in my chest settled, like a weight shifting off-center. Around noon, I checked my voicemail. 1 new message. "Hi, this is Travis Mitchell from Pine Ridge Mortgage Services. Miss R, we've received your request to revoke your guarantee. We do need to discuss some legal and procedural implications as soon as possible. Please call back today. Thank you." I deleted it. An hour later, Dorian called, then again, then Maris. None of those calls made it past the first ring. Around 4 in the afternoon, someone knocked, loudly. I didn't move. More banging. I walked slowly to the door, keeping quiet, my feet brushing the worn rug that covered the hallway floor. "Melody," my mother's voice rang through. "Open this door right now." I didn't respond, just leaned slightly and looked through the peephole. She stood there, makeup smudged, hair tied back in a knot that was starting to fall loose. Her hands were clenched. She looked less like the composed woman from church potlucks and more like someone on the edge. "You're ruining everything. You're destroying our lives," she screamed. Inside, I barely blinked. I leaned forward until my lips were close enough to the door to be heard, but not loud. "I just stopped letting you destroy mine." There was a beat. Silence. Then more knocking. Slower now, less angry, more desperate. I stepped away and let her yell fade behind me as I moved to the couch and sat back down. That night, I opened my journal, the one I hadn't touched since Dorian moved into the house. I flipped past the first few pages, old entries about work stress, groceries, that book I meant to finish but never did. On a fresh page, I wrote, Maybe silence isn't weakness. Maybe it's my sharpest weapon. I paused. Flashes came back, childhood moments, memories that had stayed buried beneath the veneer of keeping peace. Times when I'd wanted to speak up but was told, "Don't embarrass your mother," or "That's not how we talk in this family," or the ever-famous, "Just let it go, Melody." But this wasn't something to let go. Not anymore. They wanted to play pretend. I was done performing. The next morning, a letter arrived by courier, an official envelope from the mortgage office. Inside, notice of risk, mortgage account 3876. Due to change in co-signer participation, your loan is now under internal review for reassessment. Please contact your branch representative immediately. I read it twice. Set it on the counter beside the folder labeled Property Documents. Then I made a cup of coffee, black, no sugar. As I sipped, I looked out the window. People walked their dogs. A kid rode past on a scooter, yelling to a friend down the block. Life moved on like nothing had changed. But inside that house they clung to so tightly, the cracks were forming, the rot had begun. And it wasn't because I screamed or threw things or stormed in demanding apologies. It was because I quietly removed the one thing they never imagined I'd take away, my consent. Let the house crumble. Let's see who they blame when the floor vanishes beneath them. The message sat in my inbox, its subject line cold and factual. Notice of mortgage account freeze. Urgent action required. I didn't need to open it to know what it said. I'd been expecting it since the moment I pressed send, but I opened it anyway, reading each line slowly like I was tracing the sharp edge of a blade. Your revocation has triggered an account freeze. Mortgage partner has been notified. Please contact our office to arrange next steps. No warmth, no apologies, just mechanics. That was fine. I hadn't sent that email to be understood. I sent it to be obeyed. Moments later, my phone lit up. Voicemail from Dorian. I didn't play it immediately. I let it sit there, buzzing with all the venom I already knew was inside. When I finally tapped it open, his voice spilled into the room. "You think you're clever, huh? You think pulling some legal stunt's gonna change anything? You'll regret this, Melody. You always were the weak one. Don't think you can take this from us." I didn't flinch. I forwarded the voicemail to my lawyer and included it in the same email chain titled Mortgage Account Safety Concerns. That same afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I logged into my old home security app. The login still worked. The thumbnails loaded slowly, years of old cloud footage blinking to life. I scrolled back to that night, the night I left bleeding. It wasn't crystal clear, but it was enough. The hallway cam had caught part of it. Dorian's voice, unmistakable. My fall, the moment of impact, my mother's voice trailing from the kitchen. "Don't make a scene." My stomach clenched hearing it again. I downloaded the clip, attached it along with the ER report, photos of my injuries, and the screenshot of Maris's text. "Stay away from us." Subject line, proof of assault plus statement withdrawal. I didn't add commentary. The facts spoke louder than I ever could. 3 days passed. On the 4th morning, a sheriff's cruiser pulled up to the house I used to call home. I was parked across the street, not hidden, but not obvious either. The deputy stepped up to the porch, knocked once. Dorian opened the door, shirtless, irritated. Maris stood behind him, arms crossed. The officer handed them a folded notice. I recognized the document before they even opened it. Property co-owner has filed for unilateral possession due to safety concerns. Dorian looked around the neighborhood, like searching for someone to blame. His eyes landed on me. He sneered. You don't get it. This house isn't just paper. It's ours. I didn't move. He shouted across the lawn, voice rising with every step. You ungrateful witch! You think you're better than us now? Still, I didn't react. Instead, I raised my phone and hit record. Maris stepped onto the porch behind him, not yelling, not defending me, just watching. Her expression was unreadable, but her silence was too familiar. Over the next few hours, they carried out boxes, one by one. I didn't count them. There was no U-Haul, just their beat-up Toyota sedan, parked too close to the mailbox. They packed what they could and left the rest. Around dusk, they were gone. I sat in my car for a long time after, not to gloat, not to gawk, just to be sure it was real. That night, I went home and opened my journal. That house was supposed to be our sanctuary. They turned it into a war zone. I just took back the land. I filed away the latest documents in the binder, labeled everything neatly, like a case file, like evidence. Then I made tea, sat on the couch, let myself breathe. Later, my phone buzzed again. A text, unknown number. You think you've won? We're not done. No name, no punctuation. I stared at it for a moment. Then I hit delete, got up, checked the locks, pulled the curtain closed, and whispered to the dark, if they want to keep playing, I'll show them how quiet thunder sounds. The text still hovered in the back of my mind, but by morning I'd moved past the sting of it. Something heavier than fear had taken root, resolve. I spent most of that Saturday cleaning the apartment, wiping down cabinets that didn't need it, sorting through drawers I hadn't opened in months. I wasn't avoiding anything, I was making space. Late afternoon, someone knocked. Not aggressive, not timid, measured. When I opened the door, my Uncle Thatcher stood there, holding a paper bag that looked suspiciously like it came from the corner bakery. Didn't know if you still liked lemon scones, he said simply. I stepped aside, let him in. He placed the bag on the counter without ceremony and took the seat by the window like he always had when he visited Dad, back when things were normal. He didn't ask how I was. I think he already knew the answer. I need to tell you something, he said after a beat. And I should have said it years ago. He leaned forward, elbows resting on knees, his voice lowered, not from secrecy, but gravity. When Isolde was 16, he began, she got involved with someone older, real smooth talker, older than me, actually, used to come around the library where Maris worked. I felt my stomach shift. Isolde told your mom about him, told her it wasn't right, that she felt scared. You know what Maris said? I didn't answer. She said Isolde was jealous, that she was trying to make drama out of nothing. He shook his head, jaw tight. 2 weeks later, your sister was shipped off to Aunt Rachel's in Idaho. Never said why, just a fresh start. I blinked, trying to process. She never told me. She wasn't allowed to. Maris made her swear. And when I tried to talk to your mom about it, said I'd seen red flags, she stopped speaking to me for almost 5 years. Silence filled the room like thick fog. It wasn't just me. It had never been just me. This isn't new, is it? I whispered. He looked at me, eyes tired but firm. No, Melody. It's not. I nodded slowly, something inside me cracking. Not a loud break, but a silent collapse. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the neighbor's chimney and the clouds returned, I stood at the window watching the first droplets hit the pavement. A week passed, long days where time felt both urgent and sluggish. I stayed busy, work, errands, reading, but the tension under my skin never fully left. Then the day came. I didn't dress up, just jeans, a sweater. I sat in my car across from the house, not mine anymore, not theirs either, watching as the rain started up again, heavier now. Dorian was on the porch, muttering as he tried to tarp the last of their boxes. Maris stood behind him, her umbrella useless in the wind. She didn't look at me, not once. He shoved the last box into the trunk with more force than needed. The car door slammed. He turned to glance across the street, scowling when he saw me. "You happy now?" he shouted across the rain. "This what you wanted?" I didn't move, didn't blink. Maris turned then. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. She looked hollow, not angry, not sad, just used up. She stepped into the passenger seat, closed the door, and then they were gone. I stood under the awning, the journal in my arms. Didn't wave, didn't call out. Some goodbyes don't need words, they echo without them. That night, I lit a small fire in the fireplace. The house smelled faintly of pine and lavender from the drawer sachets I'd kept over the years. I pulled an old keepsake box from under the bed. Inside, a crayon drawing, crinkled and faded. I must have been 7 when I made it. Me and Maris, stick figures with big smiles, holding hands beneath a sun drawn too large. I stared at it for a long time. It was the only version of us that had ever looked whole. Then I folded it carefully and placed it into the fire. The paper curled, blackened, vanished. "Let's build something new," I said to no one, without pretending it was ever whole. I had always believed that silence was safety, that if I kept my head down and my voice even, the worst parts of life would pass by without noticing me. But by the time I stood in the hallway outside courtroom 3B, that belief had long rotted away. The building smelled like old wood polish and nerves. My lawyer, Deborah, stood beside me, flipping through our case file one last time. She didn't talk much, just the way I preferred it. Everything she needed to say, she'd already said the moment I handed her the USB drive with the footage and the envelope of photos. "This is going to feel strange," she'd warned earlier that week. "You're not only telling your truth, you're exposing theirs." I'd nodded. I knew. I'd lived it. The bailiff opened the door. Deborah and I stepped in. The courtroom was only half full. Family court rarely drew a crowd, but in the first row sat Maris. Hair ironed flat, lips painted in a shade too dark for her skin. Beside her, Dorian leaned back in his chair like it was a recliner, one arm stretched along the bench behind her. His smirk widened when he saw me. We didn't nod, we didn't blink. We took our seats. Dorian's lawyer, a well-dressed man with too much product in his hair, stood up first. He spoke with confidence, as if he'd delivered this speech before, many times. "My client is the victim of a personal vendetta. This is a woman," he gestured toward me, "who's been emotionally volatile for years. Her own mother can attest to this pattern. This isn't about safety. This is about control." Deborah didn't flinch. When the judge nodded, she stood slowly, turned toward me, and gave a slight tilt of her head. "Ms. R," she said, "please tell the court why we're here today." I stood. My knees didn't buckle, my palms didn't sweat. I pulled the USB from my bag and handed it to the clerk. The lights dimmed as the monitor flickered to life. The grainy footage played. Dorian's voice filled the room, clear enough for every syllable to land like a slap. "My fall." Maris's voice. "Don't make a scene." A silence fell after the screen went dark. I stepped forward. "I didn't file this because I was angry," I said, voice steady. "I filed it because I didn't feel safe." I held up a stack of papers. ER report from that night. These are the photos the nurse took before they stitched my lip. Here's the voicemail Dorian left threatening me after I revoked my co-signature. I turned to the judge, not to Dorian, not even to my mother. "And this," I said, raising my phone, "is the message my mother sent the night I left bleeding from her floor." I read it aloud. Stay away from us. The judge didn't ask me to repeat it. He didn't need to. He looked down, took a breath, and turned to Deborah. Is there anyone else? She nodded. Yes, Your Honor. One more witness. Ms. Enid Blakely. The courtroom door creaked open. Enid walked in slowly, assisted by her cane. She was in her late 70s, lived 2 doors down from the house. Most folks in the neighborhood just called her Miss Enid. She took the stand, cleared her throat. I heard yelling that night, she said, voice shaky but strong. Then I saw her, Melody, stumble out the front door holding her side. That man, she pointed at Dorian. He slammed the door behind her. Deborah stepped back. No further questions. The judge's gaze lingered on Enid, then shifted to me, then to Maris. For the first time, my mother looked at me, and for the first time, I didn't look back. The gavel fell. Protective order approved. Investigation into domestic assault will proceed. Respondents are to have no contact with the petitioner, effective immediately. Dorian jolted in his seat. You can't be serious, he shouted. The judge didn't blink. You're excused. Outside, the air felt heavier. Deborah gathered her things and left quickly, murmuring, Call me if they contact you. I stood on the steps, feeling the weight of months slide off me like a damp coat. Maris came out a few minutes later. She didn't look as composed now. Her lipstick was smudged. She approached slowly, like she was unsure of her footing. Melody, she said, reaching out. I stepped back. This is the first time, I said quietly. I feel safe in years. She didn't say another word, just watched me walk away. That evening, I returned home and checked my email. New message. No subject. Dorian's security clearance revoked. Job terminated effective immediately. I read it twice. Then I closed my laptop, poured myself a glass of water, and whispered to the quiet room, That's not revenge. That's consequence. The courthouse verdict didn't echo loudly beyond those 4 walls, but the ripples reached further than I expected. Word got around, as it always does in places where people drink coffee more for the conversation than the caffeine. And in Eugene, whispers carry faster than radio signals. I sat on the front porch of my apartment the next morning with a cup of chamomile tea, watching a squirrel dismantle the top of my neighbor's bird feeder. There was no elation, no victory dance, just breath, just stillness. I didn't feel like a woman who had just reclaimed a piece of her life. I felt like someone who had finally put down a bag she hadn't realized she'd been carrying for 20 years. That afternoon, a message popped up from an old coworker. Heard about the court thing. That took guts. Good for you. I didn't reply, but I appreciated it. By midweek, I'd heard through someone, who heard from someone else, that Dorian had lost his job. His clearance was pulled less than 48 hours after the court ruling. No access, no options, no explanation needed. Corporate policy handled what conscience never could. Maris had moved in with her cousin Linda on the outskirts of Corvallis. Apparently, Linda wasn't thrilled about it. Temporary was the word I heard, as if anyone was lining up to offer permanence. Then, Thursday morning, I found a plain white envelope slipped under my door. No return address, no handwriting I recognized. I hesitated, fingers resting on the flap, wondering what kind of toxin might be folded inside. Inside was a letter. Just 1 page, folded in thirds, neat, precise. It was from Maris. She didn't start with, Dear Melody. She didn't start with an apology either. Instead, she wrote, I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not asking for it. I just wanted you to have this. Inside the folded paper was something else, a photocopy, a note I'd written her when I was 15. I recognized my rounded high school cursive, the sparkly blue ink from a gel pen I used to think made me seem creative. "You asked me to read this once," Maris wrote below it. "I'm sorry it took me 18 years. I sat on the couch, the letter spread across my lap like a fragile artifact. In the note, teenage me had written about feeling unseen, about needing her to listen, to just show up once, not for school, not for public things, but for me. She never had. And now, here it was again. I didn't cry. I didn't clutch it like a lost treasure. I folded the letter carefully and placed it into the drawer beside my passport, the one where I kept things I didn't need but couldn't throw away, not out of forgiveness, but for the girl who had written it. A few days later, I ran into Maris in the pharmacy parking lot. I'd just picked up my refill. Migraines had become part of my emotional residue, and was walking back to my car when I saw her step out of Linda's old sedan. She looked smaller, not frail, just less, as if life had finally peeled back the layers of performance she always wore like armor. She spotted me at the same time I saw her. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she stepped forward, her mouth opened. "Melody." I held up a hand. "Don't." She stopped. I took a breath. That version of me, the one who waited for you to choose her, she's gone. Her face tightened. She didn't cry. I think she knew better than to try. "You'll have to live with what you did to her," I said, not harshly, just plainly. And like stating the weather, and I turned and walked away. It didn't feel triumphant. It didn't feel cruel. It felt necessary. Back home, I sat on the couch and opened my journal. I had written a lot in the past few months, some angry, some reflective, but the last page had been left blank on purpose. I'd been waiting. I pulled open the drawer, took out the letter, tucked it inside the back pocket of the journal, and closed it. Some ghosts deserve no exorcism, just distance. I picked up my pen and hovered over the last page. I wasn't sure what to write yet, but I knew I was ready to start something new. The cursor blinked on the screen, steady and quiet. I hadn't written anything yet, just sat there, staring at the final line in my journal. The air in the room was still, sunlight streaming in through the window I'd finally left open again. It wasn't a dramatic morning, no epiphanies or symbolic clouds breaking, just warm air and a quiet apartment. I stood and padded barefoot to the kitchen, filled the kettle, and watched the steam rise. The old radio on the counter played a soft blues track. I didn't know the artist, but I liked how unhurried the music felt, like it had nothing to prove. After pouring the hot water over the coffee grounds, I opened the window wider. The breeze was soft, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I needed to brace for anything. No hidden jabs, no silences used as weapons. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee in hand, laptop still open to the application I'd started filling out the night before. A small nonprofit was looking for part-time advocates to support survivors of domestic abuse. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't high-paying, but it felt like something real. I scrolled to the question that made me stop the first time. "Why do you want to do this work?" I rested my fingers on the keyboard and slowly typed, "Because someone should have helped me. Now I can help others." I didn't hit submit yet. I let it sit there. Some things deserve to linger. Before I closed the laptop, I reached for the drawer next to the table. The memory drawer, I called it now. A box of pieces I hadn't decided whether to keep or toss. Inside was the photo, me and Maris at the county fair. I must have been 9. Cotton candy on my cheek, her arm around me, both of us squinting into the sun, laughing. I traced the outline of the picture with my thumb. That moment had been real, but it didn't undo what came later, and that was the truth I could live with. Beside the photo was something smaller, an old cloth doll, one arm missing, one glass eye cloudy with time. Maris must have left it behind during the move. I almost put it back, but instead, I walked to the living room shelf, cleared a small space, and placed the doll there. We survive in pieces, but we still stand. Later that afternoon, while folding laundry, my phone buzzed with a voice message from Liesel. I hadn't heard from her in over a year. She had moved out of state for work, then life happened, marriage, kids, new zip code, but we'd shared lockers in middle school, secrets in high school, and a few too many glasses of wine in our 20s. I played the message. "You're not crazy," she said plainly. "You're not wrong. You're just the first one who ever said it out loud. And that matters more than you know." I sat down, held the phone to my chest for a moment, then hit replay. Then again. The next morning, I returned to the laptop. The form was still open. Nothing had timed out. I pressed submit, no fanfare, no banner across the screen, just a quiet confirmation, application received. As the day wore on, I took a walk through the neighborhood. The houses looked the same, but I didn't. I passed the church where I used to attend family brunches, the corner market where I'd once overheard neighbors whispering after everything happened. Nobody looked twice now, or maybe they did, and didn't care anymore. At home, I brewed a second cup of coffee and stepped onto my small patio. The air had a hint of spring in it, soft, uncertain, but present. I watched a squirrel climb the fence, then dart across the neighbor's yard like it owned the place. I smiled. Voiceover, if anyone ever asked me to narrate this chapter of my life, would be simple. They called it betrayal. I call it survival. I sipped my coffee slowly. This wasn't justice for them. It was freedom for me. Sometimes, the people we expect to protect us are the ones who wound us the deepest. Melody's story isn't just about pain, it's about reclaiming your voice when the world wants you quiet. Have you ever been forced to choose between family and your own peace? If this story spoke to you, share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more true stories that reveal the strength it takes to break free.